Dave Weinberg covers the Eagles for the Press of Atlantic City, and he's on the Boardwalk Honda hotline now to kind of give us a little recap on the day, which was kind of anticlimactic there, Dave. Were you surprised that Howie Roseman wasn't able to get a deal done?
Not particularly. I mean, it seems like the asking prices were just so high, and I know Howie's, he's perfectly willing to make a deal, but it has to be under his terms. And if he thinks that the people are asking too much or they're not willing to negotiate, then he's perfectly willing to walk away. I mean, it worked out great last year with Golden State. Being able to add a player, and Jay Ajayi the year before that. But I guess the Chris Harrises and the Darius Slays of the world, they just wanted too much in return, so he decided to stand pat with what he got.
Yeah, of all the spots, where did you think they needed the upgrade the most if he was able to pull off a deal?
Boy, that's a tough one. I don't think corner, because I think those guys are getting healthy, and I think they'll be okay in secondary. I would probably do one wide receiver with Robbie Anderson or somebody like that, because I just have my doubts about whether Deshaun Jackson is going to be able to return to what he showed in the first game of the year. He's been bothered by this abdominal sports hernia or whatever it is, and that's the kind of thing that's going to linger, I think, for a while. So, as you guys mentioned earlier in the day, I think that all it takes is like one wrong twist or turn, and he aggravates that thing again, and he's out again. So, I think I would have tried to upgrade the wide receiver spot if I could, but I guess there just wasn't anybody out there that they felt was worth like a high draft pick or whatever.
Yeah, Dave, you mentioned your concerns with the wide receiver spot, specifically Deshaun Jackson, and rightfully so. But outside of the wide receiver position, or if you want to, go into more detail with that spot, what's your biggest area of concern? What position right now that the deadline has passed?
Boy. I'm going to say probably defensive tackle. I mean, they added a bunch of guys off of other guys' practice squads, but I don't think that's going to cut it. They really got to hope that Tim Jernigan comes back healthy and takes some pressure off of Fletcher Cox, although he played fantastic the other day. But I think like the defensive line as a whole. Well, the defensive ends, I guess they have a lot of bodies there, so I think they'll be okay there. But the interior of the defensive line, I think, is probably the main concern.
So something that we saw this past game against the Bills that was very successful is the run game, and we saw that in other key wins as well earlier this season in Green Bay. And something we saw that we haven't seen really ever is two running backs on the field at the same time.
Yeah,
which
that was pretty cool, yeah.
Yeah, so what were your thoughts with that? Do you think that's something that Doug's going to go back to a little bit more frequently, especially with the wide receiver concerns?
Depends on the opponent, but yeah, I think so. The more you can run the ball, the better off you're going to be. I mean, he's never going to be like a 75-25 run to pass. That's just not the way he thinks. But, I can certainly see like a more of a 50-50 split. But you have to remember, I think the game kind of dictates that too. Like if you get a big lead, you're going to run the ball more to shoot some time off the clock. But I thought that Jordan Howard did fantastic. Miles Sanders certainly is proved that he can be a home run hitter for them. So, yeah, I am. And I think Doug is willing to. I think he does a very good job of adapting to what he has to work with. He showed that last year, or last 2 years, really, when Carson went down. He kind of redesigned the playbook a little bit to fit Nick Foles' strengths, and I think he'll do the same here. I think he knows he doesn't have a whole lot to work with as wide receiver standpoint, so I could see him relying on the run game a little bit more going forward.
Dave, you mentioned that big win for the Eagles, 4-4 at the halfway point. You did mention in a tweet that they got to start beating some NFC teams here. But what I want to get from you is 4-4, 8 games in. Are you buying this team enough that they can start stockpiling wins with the way the schedule? You got these 3 home games. You got the bye here. You got a really light back end. Did you see enough through the first 8 to feel that this team has enough talent to start stockpiling wins?
I think 4-4 is probably better where most people had them maybe after the first 8 games. I mean, you can argue about they lost to some teams they should have beaten. They beat some teams they should have lost to maybe. So I kind of like it all. It all turned out pretty much the way people expected. I think. I think this Bears game is huge though. That's the game that they really have to have. I think to gain some momentum going into the bye. You get a win over an NFC team like we mentioned. because you got New England and Seattle coming up that I think are going to be really, really tough games for them. If they can get a win here, then like you mentioned, the back end of the schedule eases up a little bit. I think they can take 2 from the Giants. They can beat the Redskins again. Certainly beat the Dolphins. But certainly, I don't know, I guess the Cowboys game will be the one that really determines everything. If they beat them, then I think the division title is going to be on the line, and they have to win the division to get into the playoffs because I don't see any way they make the wild card.
Yeah, the NFC just seems a little bit too deep for that to happen, Dave. And we haven't really discussed with you all the locker room craziness that went on last week, particularly Thursday, Friday, end of last week. So what do you think the current state of the locker room is like now? I mean, Sunday's win, I think, tells us a lot, but it's still one game, and they still have to stick together and remain a strong group for a long period of time. So do you think they're capable of doing that? Is that a rallying point, Skandrick's comments, for the remainder of the year?
Yeah, I think so. As everybody knows, they had a players-only meeting at the end of the week where they kind of aired out their differences, I guess. And, some players, Malcolm Jenkins, Carson Wentz, and some guys stood up and let the players know what's expected. That the team is, they're a family almost. And you can't let outside forces, whether it's, rumors or innuendos or anonymous players, mouthing off to reporters, or a guy who's with the team for like 10 minutes thinks he knows what's going on in the locker room. It just doesn't. The bottom line is, they, as you guys know, they thrive on this underdog stuff. They play their best when they think everybody's against them. And
why do they have to be an underdog, Dave? Why does it have to be chaos for this team to rally together?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess they just need something to carry them. And so whether it's invented, whether it's real, they always view themselves as this like underdogs. They get out the dog masks and all this other stuff. Everybody's expected them to do very well 2 years ago. I don't know where that came from, but it's just I guess you find motivation wherever you can get it. And they just seem to have a knack or a habit of just grabbing on those something, whether it's real or imagined, and kind of running with it.
Dave Weinberg, Press of Atlantic City, covers the Eagles. And by the way, had an interesting column this weekend. He suggested the Eagles should make a call to Jacksonville and see if they could have brought Nick Foles back at the trade deadline. You're not serious, are you?
No, kind of like half-heartedly. The only reason I mentioned it was, I'm a big Foles guy. I have to admit it, and I assume from a financial standpoint, they have to bring him back and put him back in the lineup for Jacksonville. But what if Gardner Minshew, this Minshew mania, everybody's with the Fu Manchu mustaches and the jorts and all this other stuff. What if he played very well last week, Sunday.
I saw that, Dave. I saw that, Dave, and said, "Is Dave Weinberg really stirring this fan base's pot again? You're really getting this group all worked up out there."
Well, you got to do something to keep them interested, I guess.
Dave Weinberg, longtime beat writer from the Press of Atlantic City, and of course, he joined us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Eagles Bears this weekend. I know it's early. You got a early feel there, Dave?
I gotta think the Eagles are going to be able to pull one out. I mean, they've been on the road 3 straight weeks. The crowd, the fans are really antsy to see them, the favorite team in action again. Bears are kind of like going off the rails a little bit. They seem to be falling apart. So I would be very surprised if the Eagles don't pull out a win here.
All right, Dave. Always appreciate the time, pal.
All right, thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Dave Weinberg, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.